Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to That Trippi Show with Alex Astro. This week, let's start with some good news. No, really. This will be a quick show today. I'm traveling and actually am in real dire need of internet. I'm doing this on my iPhone's hotspot, so we'll hope it holds. But Alex and I wanted to get you a few updates we just had to talk about. Alex, where do you want to get started?
Yeah, well, you're coming through loud and clear for me, Joe. So hopefully our listeners will be able to hear you okay. And like you said, we'll keep this brief today and be back in full force next week. Actually, I will foreshadow we have a very exciting guest next week that I'm really looking forward to talk to her. You've heard her before, but we can talk about that next week. All right, Joe. Let's talk about you emailed me about this. I want to make sure we get to it. It seems like it's kind of a trend now. I mean, it is a trend now. Democrats once again did very well in special elections this past week. There actually are already special elections going on. What'd you see from these two, Trippi?
You know, first in Minnesota, the DFL candidate, Doran Clark, won a state Senate seat in their special election, which breaks a 33-33 tie in the Senate. So that's important. And it gives Democrats control of the state Senate chamber. Yeah. And that's always important. But it's a big Democratic seat. I think Harris got 83 or something there. He got 94. I mean,
but big one just because when it's a balance of power seat, money flows in, and it's important to win it.
Well, it's also important to break the tie in the Senate there, state Senate there. That's a big one. But the bigger one is Iowa, where Democrat Mike Zimmer won his Senate special, which was held by the Republican who resigned to serve as lieutenant governor. In 2022, the Republican won it by 22 points. Trump won it by 21 points in 2024. That is a massive swing in this district that I think, we saw this in other years. And again, it portends that all the reporting that we were dead. Remember how close the election was. Yes, we lost. Yes, we've got a lot of work to do. But the electorate is not as far gone as people and the pundits would make people believe. And that's a really important sign. I think it also points to Virginia this year. And I think that sort of sets the next marker. There'll be other specials and other things, but I think it puts Virginia front and center. If what normally happens, the president's party that won the election loses the governorship there. And we've got a great candidate in Spanberger there. So we'll see how that.
And Mickey Sherrill in New Jersey. So we'll see. Oh, I know that's a primary still, but yeah, I like Mickey, but anyway. Yeah.
But the one New Jersey, is important, but Virginia, I think this Mike Zimmer vote in Iowa, that's a pretty stunning thing to come up from 22 points that they won it in 2022, 21 points that Trump won it in 2024. How much did Zimmer win that thing by?
I think it was 4 points, 52-48, something like that. So a 25-point overperformance, that's huge.
Yeah, so we'll see if that continues. And I think it's some hopeful news. If we put up the fight, we can win, and we are, at least in Iowa, and we'll see now, Virginia.
This is my worry. And by the way, I know we have a running gag that I am getting more cynical as we record these podcasts. I'm worried that our listeners are starting to do it too. We had a couple listeners write in with, and I'm going to kind of synthesize these, but various kind of versions of, well, you were saying the same thing about specials in 2024, 2023, 2021, so on. What makes, I know it's two quick specials, but what makes it different, and why are you still optimistic? And give our listeners a little bit more hope.
Look, I think what happened in 2016 with people didn't think Trump could win, that Hillary was going to, take it. I think the reaction was then to really hunker down in 2018, and then in 20 the same, and we won, and then I think Biden won. We have a lot of problems, age, et cetera, And people still didn't think that Trump was going to come back in 2024. Oh, and the other, factors that all took place, the debate, Trump, Biden getting out. But so far, when we've seen these specials, and again, 2024 was not that big. I mean, it was 200,000 votes in a few places, and the whole thing would be different. So I think that's what these specials point to, is that we are competitive. We can still do this. It didn't mean Mike Zimmer had to work hard. He had to get out there and win that race. We can win them. And here's the thing, the House, they have it by 4 or 5 seats right now. I think, again, fight in Virginia, go after the 5 or 6, 7, 8 House seats that we really need. And if we can stall Trump out by taking the House back in 2026. This is a long-term battle. Democracy's not easy. It's hard. It's not the default position. Actually, kings, dictators, and strongmen have been the default position for all humankind for roughly the whole 10,000 years we've been around, except for the last 200 or 300, essentially, where this experiment, could people govern themselves? And what we lost, I think what we learned is, in these specials, if we do the work and we get our votes out, we win. The other thing I think it shows, again, and we've seen this repeatedly, is that when Trump's not on the ballot, when he's not on the ballot, there's a whole group of his constituents, of his cult, that don't come out. And so guess what? He's not going to be on the ballot in 26. And I think he was on the ballot in 24. He was on the ballot in 16. He was on the ballot in 2020. Those are different than 18, 22, and 26. And that's all I'm saying. And the same thing with these off-cycle specials. So, we'll see his favorable numbers are going down. He's lost considerable. He's got the highest unfavorables of any.
Hell of a week. We haven't even seen the favorables after this week yet. Yeah.
And he's continuing. When you look at all the polling on the number of things he's done, and people's favorable or unfavorable towards them, everything from birthright, citizenship, et cetera, where big majorities of Americans oppose these executive orders, and a large chunk of them. So we'll see. But right now, we have work to do. The biggest thing, I saw a presentation by Ian Brenner of Protect Democracy, in which he went through sort of the history of these kind of authoritarian hard right movements. And the opposition succeeded. So he was looking at where, like in Poland, for instance, or in Hungary, what was the difference between opposition success and failure? And the success was always an opposition coalescing, unified, and pushing forward relentlessly and united. And where the opposition failed to thwart the authoritarian push was when it kind of was so stunned that it didn't react in time. It didn't coalesce and unify in time. In Hungary, for instance, 5 now elections in which Orban has won. And it's all tied to how strong the opposition, not just how strong, but how fast it reacts and how unified it is. And so, I think you take that into account. That's what we all have to work towards. That means put our own differences aside on some of these issues. We have to compromise ourselves and push forward. And I think the places to do that right now, where we can consolidate and move forward in a unified path, are Virginia. I think we can rally around 10 to 20 House candidates, get behind specific candidates, unify behind them, and make sure they win. If we do that and we stay unified, and again go push into 2028 as a unified pro-democracy movement and party, I think that's our best shot at pushing beyond all this. And I do think that the signs are still there that if the Constitution holds, Trump will not be on the ballot in 2028 either. And right now, we got to concentrate that he won't be on the ballot in 2026. He wasn't on the ballot in these specials. And just like when he hasn't been on the ballot in other specials or in off-year elections, the turnout of the MAGA cult has declined. That's what we've got to not count on that, but we have to counter it with our own unified front and take it to them. And that's what Mike Zimmer did.
Before we move on from the specials, I do want to just point out one thing I noticed, and going back looking at what they talked about in the races. Abortion was not super high on either of the two races, which I realize there will still be fights there, and we need to take a strong stand in support of reproductive freedom everywhere. But in Iowa, Mike Zimmer talked about economic opportunity, leveling the playing field. Like, it was a much more economic message that worked. And I think the difference that at least that gives me a little bit of hope moving forward is there was a massive surge in specials where abortion was the key issue. We saw that a lot in the last 4 years. These two weren't. And so if that means that Democrats are finding new ground to connect with voters on and win on, that is a good sign. That's not saying abortion will take a back seat or it's not important, but this is a good sign to me that they're meeting people where they are after it did not break through like we thought it would in 2024.
I agree with all that, but you also have to remember that they're becoming more and more MAGA. Their members, their candidates are becoming even further out of the norm. And so, Zimmer was able to find his opponent as anti-vax conspiracy theorist and tied her up to Steve King, who remains really unpopular there, as do a lot of the MAGA crowd. And that's what I mean. This is not Trump. This will be an individual, a Marjorie Taylor Greene type, and they can't help themselves. So my point is, these three national elections that have been so tight, I'm talking 2016, 2020, 2024, all had Trump on the ballot. Most of the other elections in between, specials or off year, the Democrats really outperformed, including when we were supposed to get wiped out in 2022, the big red wave was supposed to come. Yeah, we did. We lose seat. Yeah, of course we did. It's what happens in the year after you win the presidential election. Guess who that is this time? It's them. And even we, when we did thwart the big red wave, lost a little, right? That's what I'm saying. So there are all kinds of reasons. And again, you look at these specials. Let's see, there's only that's been the first few, but I think, like I said, there'll be others. Virginia, I think it's going to be a major test. And then I think we go into 26, and we really need to coalesce behind some strong candidates now. Don't wait. Get behind them, get them to get and start and getting behind people who understand the messaging, like Mike Zimmer did, that's working. And understand that and focus on it and that's what I'm saying. Yes, you may have an issue that you desperately think has to be number one. No, we got to win before we can govern. And this time we really need to win in the next, in Virginia in the next few, in 2026 for sure. If we can take the House back, that alone will stall a lot of the really horrible stuff that they're going to be able to do with all three branches in both House and Senate.
Joe, I know we're running short on time and internet bandwidth here, but you got to weigh in on this funding fiasco. I mean, the Trump freeze, they said it was frozen, now it's not. Maybe it still is. They stopped Medicaid payments. I mean, this is just a reminder of how colossally the Trump administration can screw things up very quickly. We'll get more into it next week, but I'm curious if you have any kind of 30,000-foot thoughts.
This was a plan. This isn't, they had 100 of these things lined up. You pointed out that the government froze Medicaid payments. Oh, and by the way, they're saying that they didn't rescind the order, they just rescinded the memo. I mean, all the people who want to get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security are now running things. Remember Project 2025? These are the people in charge now. They're going to do all of it. They meant it. one of the main guys behind Project 2025 is going to be in charge of the Office of Management and Budget. What do you think is going to happen? He's doing this. Of course, the same press corps who took Trump's verbiage about how he didn't know anybody at 2025, Project 2025, he had nothing to do with it, didn't even like some of those people and all that good shit, are doing a horrible job of basically reporting accurately now that, oh shit, we got it wrong. He implementing the Project 2025 playbook and putting in place the people who wrote it and designed it. And by the way, also designed and wrote the first 100 or so, helped design and write the 100 or so first executive orders, many of which are unconstitutional. Now we got to see whether we're going to be in a constitutional crisis or not. And we're probably well on our way to one as we speak. This is the new normal. Trump and the tech bros are finding out that move fast and break things really breaks things in the federal government, and they're out to do it. There's this little thing called the Constitution, which is the basis for lawsuits and everything else that's going on. Republicans voted for the budget and the programs that Trump's trying to kill now, and that's going to be ongoing. And as for a response from Democrats, Democrats define this one well. George Sargent wrote, Trump's funding freeze disaster shows that not everything has to be reducible to kitchen table concerns. Yes, the freeze did impact people materially, but Dems set the media's agenda by arguing loudly that this is an illegal grab for dictatorial power. And that's what I'm saying. We have to get unified. We have to get loud, very loud on this stuff, because the press isn't going to call it out. We have to. And get behind, one of the interesting ideas that Ian Bassett had at Protect Democracy on a call I was on with him was interesting. There's nothing that stops Democrats from announcing today that we are holding a primary for our Democratic presidential nominee in the 2026 election. That we're going to, for the next 2 years, launch our primary, everybody in who wants in, and get unified behind a single voice who would be the opposition leader and our candidate in 2028, 2 years ahead of time. And let that debate counter the crap and the bullshit that's going on right now. I thought it was a pretty interesting idea. He wasn't necessarily for it, but suggested it as a possibility. And I think that's an idea that maybe should get kicked around.
Joe, I know that's probably a whole show in and of itself, and we will definitely get into that in probably the next show or whenever we can after our next guest. But I think that's a very, very solid place for us to end, given our internet issues today.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to That Trippi Show. If you're sick of all the clickbait, disinformation, there is a better way. Says Us is live, SEZ.us. Join us at Says Us. This podcast will always be free and is part of Resolute Square. Check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to That Trippi Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. Also, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question and a review on iTunes, and see you next week.
Resolute Square.